In this video, I'll show you an action sci-fi movie from 2011 titled X-Men First Class. In Germany, shortly before the end of World War II, a boy named Erik Lensherr magically bends a metal gate with rage when he's separated from his mother by the Nazis. A superior officer named Sebastian Shaw witnesses this and summons Erik to his office the next day. He asks him to magnetize a coin and threatens to shoot down his mother if he fails, then starts a countdown. Erik fails, and Shaw shoots his mother. The pain and anger Erik feels seeing his mother lifeless on the floor causes him to squeeze the guards' helmets into their heads and destroy the room. In the same timeline in New York, a young telepath known as Charles Xavier catches shapeshifter Raven in his parents' house stealing food. Seeing that she's also a mutant like himself, Charles invites her to his home, and they begin to live as siblings. In the next scene, a CIA agent, Moira, goes on a mission to keep tabs on an American colonel, Hendry. Hendry is supposed to have a secret meeting with the Hellfire Club, which consists of 4 mutants: Shaw, an energy absorber, Emma Frost, a telepath, Azazel, a teleporter, and Riptide, a cyclone bender. Moira blends in with the dancing entertainment to get a closer look at her subject. She later finds Shaw speaking about placing a missile in Turkey to start a nuclear war with the Russians. They threaten Hendry into raising the motion for the missile to be placed in Turkey, and Azazel teleports him to the joint war room. As soon as Moira discovers they are mutants, she quickly looks for a mutant expert to help convince her superior, Director McCone, that the Hellfire Club is a mutant threat. She soon locates Charles, who has already become a professor of genetics, and takes him to have a general meeting with McCone. Since McCone refuses to believe it, Charles and Raven have no option but to display their abilities. Seeing this, McCone orders them to be locked up out of his sight. A curious CIA officer takes them to an off-site facility called Division X and sponsors them instead. They plan to take Shaw down together with the CIA. That night, they set out to find Shaw, but Erik, who is seeking revenge for his mother, gets there before them and tries to attack him. He's attacked immediately and tossed into the ocean by Frost after reading his mind and discovering his motive. As the US Coast Guard approaches them with Charles giving directions, Frost discovers his telepathy and blocks his network. Charles gets a serious disturbance and also finds out that there's another telepath like him on the ship. As the Coast Guard draws near, Riptide sends a cyclone at the boats and they capsize. At the same time, Erik tries to attack Shaw's ship with an anchor chain, but he escapes with the others in a submarine attached to the ship. Erik doesn't give up and still tries to pull the submarine when Charles finds him and realizes that he might drown trying. He speaks to him through his mind and goes into the water to rescue him. This is also when Erik realizes that he's not the only mutant apart from Shaw's crew. They take Erik to Division X and are introduced to Hank McCoy, who is a good scientist for the record. Charles also finds him to be a mutant too, which comes as a shock to the CIA officer because he never revealed his abilities before. Charles asks him to show off, and he displays his prehensile feet, which could grasp onto branches quickly. Since Shaw is working for the Russians, he requests a helmet to help him prevent Charles' telepathic network, and he tests it by asking Frost to try and get into his head, which she fails to do. At Division X, Hank and Raven discuss how much they dislike their appearances and would do anything to hide their flaws. Hank then suggests using Raven's blood to find the cure. In the process, Erik finds them and advises Raven not to change how she looks and accept herself the way she is. Later, Erik packs his stuff and attempts to leave the facility to look for Shaw all by himself when Charles stops him. Charles helps him to see that he can't face Shaw alone because even Shaw himself has a team. He wants Erik to see Division X as his own team house and use the help of other mutants. Erik listens and goes back. Together, they plan to look for mutant recruits against Shaw with the help of a radio transmitter called Cerebro, created by Hank to serve as an enhancer for Charlie's telepathy. They recruit stripper Angel Salvador, cabbie Armando Munoz, army prisoner Alex Summers, and runaway Sean Cassidy. After that, Erik begins to feel wrong for collecting the other mutants. He knows the normal humans can still turn against them after they defeat Shaw. They can still come back to become their targets. Meanwhile, Hank and Raven gather the recruits and they give themselves names and show off. Raven chooses Mystique. Munoz calls himself Darwin because he can adapt. Angel can fly as well as spit fire. Alex emits a laser from his body. Sean produces sonic waves from his mouth. Just when the CIA approves their mission to Russia, they then get back to base and are disappointed to find the recruits marrying all around, with Raven and Hank on watch. After learning that Shaw intends to pay a visit to the Soviet general, they set out without the unprepared mutants to Russia. When they get to a Russian army checkpoint, Charlie tricks the military with his telepathy into seeing their truck as empty. Getting to the Soviet general's house in the USSR, they see Frost alone without Shaw and the rest of the Hellfire Club going in to see the general. Charles tries to call off the mission, but Erik sees it as an opportunity to catch Frost, so Charles goes with him eventually. Frost changes back into her diamond state as soon as Charles tries to get into her head, so they capture her and Erik tortures her to change back to normal. Then Charles gets to read her mind just then and discovers all of Shaw's plans to start World War III and create a race of mutants. But he doesn't get to know Shaw's location since he's still wearing the helmet. Later, they lock Frost up. Back at Division X, the Hellfire Club launches an attack on the CIA agents to get to the mutants, wiping out the entire base clean of humans. Shaw, who doesn't hurt mutants, asks them to join him against the humans. Only Angel accepts the offer, and when Munoz tries to attack Shaw, he gets eliminated. Shaw later visits the Soviet general in Moscow and threatens him to order a declaration of war on the United States of America by placing missiles in Cuba. So the Russians send warheads to Cuba on a ship that will take a week before hitting the US coast. Hitting the coast is going to mean that the Russians have declared war on the US, so both the Russians and the Americans prepare for war. When Charles, Erik, and Moira get back to the base and find it destroyed, they plan to avenge Munoz's death. First, they plan to train vigorously. Charles wants to help all of them control their powers, and he takes them back to his parents' house, where he grew up with Raven, which is like a fortress. Charles wants to help Alex concentrate on the emitting laser to strike only his target, for Sean to produce only the correct frequencies, as he depends on the need, and for Erik to know how to use his power not only when he's angry. Erik hates as Raven cares too much about her looks that she can't even train enough and helps her accept herself. Charles takes Alex into a laser-proof room, and Hank prepares a kit to help him direct the laser in a single direction. They stay beside a mannequin and ask him not to kill them, but only the mannequin, and he succeeds. Erik pushes Sean off a radio transmitter dish to help him control his power, since he'll need it not to die flying. Lastly, Charles takes Erik somewhere far from the dish and asks him to rotate the dish from the distance. After their successful training, Hank goes back to Raven with the completed cure, but she later refuses. Hank, on the other hand, injects himself and transforms into a creature with blue fur. As they prepare to go out to the borderline on a jet the next day, Hank appears, and they're surprised to see him in a new form. He then explains that the drugs only enhanced his mutated cells and didn't attack them. Then he goes ahead to pilot them. The Russian fleet tries to stop the ship from carrying the missiles, but unknown to them, no one is on board the ship except Azazel. He has transported himself into the ship and wiped out the crew so that the ship keeps moving toward the coast. As soon as the X-mutants arrive, Charles discovers that the crew of the ship conveying the missiles are all dead and concludes that Shaw is around somewhere. So he quickly controls one of the Soviet sailors to push a button and destroy the ship, averting the war. Hearing this news, Shaw discovers at once that Charles' telepathy is at work and moves to a backup plan. He wants to absorb enough nuclear energy that will make him become like a nuclear bomb and asks for the nuclear reactor in his submarine to be turned to 100%. Charles sends Sean down, after assuming that Shaw will have to be underwater since he can't place his location. With Sean's sonar, he discovers the submarine and comes back to tell. Erik then gets to work and pulls the submarine out with his magnetic power, and they pilot it over to the land. But while he does, Riptide shows up and attacks them with a cyclone. This causes Erik to drop the submarine to save Charles and himself as the jet crashes. When Charles discovers Shaw's plan, he sends Erik into the submarine after him, while the rest fight against his crew members. Erik gets in and deactivates the nuclear reactor, but can't find Shaw. Shaw shows up soon enough and invites Erik into the void, where Charles can't reach him. He tries to attack Shaw, but the latter absorbs all the energy and magically knocks him against the wall. The wall cracks, and Charles gets a signal through the void. Shaw then begins to apologize to Erik for his mother's death and tells him it was to help him unlock his powers. Erik tries to trap him, but he absorbs all the energy again and traps Erik instead and attempts to convince him to unite with him in taking down humanity. Erik deceives Shaw with the truth that what he did has made him into what he is now, but he takes the helmet off Shaw in the meantime, and Charles freezes him quickly. Erik then wears the helmet to prevent Charles from manipulating him, Then, he forces the same Nazi coin Shaw gave him after his mother's death through his head, eliminating him against Charles' objection. The mutants then become enemies, and both the Russians and Americans ally against them to wipe them out. Shaw deflects all the missiles fired at them and attempts to destroy the fleet with the missiles, but Charles tries to stop him. In the process, Moira attempts to shoot Erik, but he deflects the bullets and accidentally hits Charles in the spine with one, but he doesn't die. This causes him to lose concentration, and the missiles are eventually dispersed into the ocean where they explode. Raven goes with Erik to continue the mission against humans, along with the Hellfire Club crew, and they go to free Frost to join them. In the end, Erik names himself Magneto. Subscribe to Relaxed Recaps for more videos like this. Hit the notification bell and leave a like. Until next time.